Everyone, welcome to your Astro Herbal Guide to Scorpio season. Today we're going to talk about what's coming up during this season, some of the key astrological dates and transits, as well as some herbs and foods and ways that you can support your emotional and physical body through the season. So just to go over the kind of basics of Scorpio season, we are moving now into the dominant element of water. Before we had been in Libra season, which was air. So air has us dealing with communication, with relationships, with relations, our mental processes, basically how we're communicating through our relationships, right? How we're exchanging our resources and our energy and our ideas. Now, as we move into water, we're going to move into, okay, I'm understanding how I relate to people now. What am I feeling? And what am I feeling through this element of water, which has to do with our emotions, about my more intimate connections and my deeply shared resources. Scorpio is a fixed water sign, so it represents our deep emotional intensity and depth, how we relate to others, but also how we relate to our own selves and our own emotions. It is also a fixed modality. And so Libra season was cardinal, right? It ushered in the totally new season of fall. It brought in a fresh new energy. We are moving from this young, fire, heat dominant part of the summer. And now Libra season ushered us into a new environment. Now things are getting cooler. We're cleansing, we're releasing. And now with Scorpio season, we're fixed in that energy. We're in the crux of it. We're in the sort of quintessential fall, autumn energy. So fixed signs and fixed energy is stable, it's determined, it's persistent energy. It keeps the consistency of that season. And I think this is really obvious when you think about Scorpio season. You think about Halloween, you think about how we're celebrating death, we're celebrating the transformation of things around us. So lots of fixed energy here. The ruling planets for this season, we have two. We have Mars and Pluto. Traditionally is Mars, and then because Pluto was discovered more recently, we have its modern ruler of Pluto. Mars is a fire planet, right? So it's funny when we talk about Scorpio, a lot of times people will think, oh, it's a fire sign. Or I saw a funny TikTok where someone was talking about how the fire signs all relate to each other. And then they were like, oh, and including Scorpio. And it's because of that Mars rulership, we have this association with passion, with desire, and with action. With Mars, we're really talking about the actual act of death. And with Pluto, we're talking about what comes after the death, or what does the struggle or the war, Mars rules over war, what does that do to you? How do you evolve through that conflict and through that struggle? So the modern ruler of Scorpio is associated with Pluto, transformation, power, death, and rebirth. Mars is the god of war, but he's also the god of agriculture and the seed. He also rules over Aries, right? The beginning of spring, the beginning of the astrological new year, the birth. So with both of these rulers, you get the entire scope of Scorpio, which is not just the process and the initiation, the transformation of death, but how does that evolve you into new life? How does that renew you and cleanse you for something new? The symbol for Scorpio is the scorpion. One of the symbols for Scorpio, there are several, but I think the most commonly associated and seen one is the scorpion. It's associated with protection, with intensity, and hidden power. So we think about the scorpion as this small animal, but very powerful, very poisonous, very painful sting that is waiting in the dark with this poised stinger that wants to protect itself. It's this intense strike of aggression, and also this aspect of like hidden. It's in the dark, and you don't see the stinger until it's too late, or you don't even see the scorpion until it's too late. And then the glyph, which is the symbol that you'll see for Scorpio in astrology on charts, is this M with the tail with a pointer on it. And that's to symbolize the scorpion sting. Again, that's kind of waiting for us in the dark. The body parts that we want to focus on, that we want to honor, that we want to acknowledge and support during this time are the sort of in keeping with the Scorpio vibes and the Scorpio themes of hidden power and the unseen forces at work in the body. We're talking about the parts of the body that maybe we don't really think about, or we don't talk about, maybe because, in society they're unsightly or they're considered gross. There's oftentimes a lot of shaming around talking about these body parts. Or they have to do with blood, or they have to do with waste. And so it's maybe a topic that you wouldn't bring it up at the dinner table, but Scorpio season is having us really look at these body parts and acknowledge them and honor their processes, because they are essential processes of elimination, renewal, and transformation. So we're talking about our reproductive organs, thinking about, the menstrual cycle, the shame around talking about the menstrual cycle, talking about blood, the sexual organs, the colon and the bladder. So the cleansing of the blood, the cleansing of the body, detoxifying the body, and then eliminating the process of elimination. Because Scorpio is this crux of fall, we're thinking for health-wise, cleansing, cooling, and renewing. And how can we help our body and acknowledge the processes that are doing this work for us? The opposite sign, or the balancing energy of Scorpio, is Taurus. Taurus comes up in the crux of spring, right? So Taurus is all about the birth and the blossom and the beauty of all of new things blossoming and budding. And then Scorpio is about their death and their decay and their rotting and their falling away. And so this balancing moment will have a full moon in Taurus as this balancing moment during Scorpio season. During all of this transformation, Taurus is also about security, safety, softness, the earthly pleasures or earthly existence in our body. We're doing all of this Scorpio work, which has to do with delving into the emotions and the psyche. The full moon in Taurus is this kind of balancing moment of like, okay, but how are you grounding what you're learning in your body and in the real world? And together they create this axis, has to do with our self-worth, our possessions, and our shared resources. So these are a lot of what the Scorpio spiritual themes are revolving around during this season. And then for the colors, I want you to think about, when you're eating foods or you're picking herbs to work with, deep reds, maroons, blacks, purples, colors that are associated with power, with mystery, and with intensity. And also with blood, right? That's what I think about when I think about deep reds, maroons, and blacks. So these are great foods that can help to support the body processes during that time. And also we'll talk about white foods, because we want during the fall, we talk about the large intestines and the processes of elimination. This is the large intestine, and also the lungs. And white foods and white herbs can really help support the lungs as well. But really wanted to highlight those deep reds, maroons, blacks, purples, because I feel like they just go along with Scorpio very well. So Scorpio season is the time when nature is visibly dying around us. And that really encompasses a lot of the the lessons of Scorpio season is about confronting this sort of uncomfortable, again, taboo topic of death, or of things that we maybe don't want to talk about because they're painful. Um, Grief is a huge emotion that comes up during the fall in general, which is why supporting the lungs and the large intestines as they help us eliminate and move and process grief is so important. We're grieving during this time where we're noticing the loss of the harvest. We've gathered what we need from the harvest. We've begun to share it and exchange it with those around us. And now we're watching everything begin to rot and decay, moving us even further into that true season of death, which is winter. So a lot of the lessons will have to do with, or a lot of the themes that are coming up during this time will have to do with nature visibly dying around us and how that affects us and affects our bodies, this change in the natural world that we're unable to really run from, we're being confronted with. So this season invites us to confront our own mortality as well, as we're witnessing all the death and decay around us, and to dive into our shadow. And in doing this, we're revealing things that even we may not have known about, powerful forces that are moving behind the scenes, these kind of unseen forces of life and death. So Scorpio really represents the reckoning also with unchecked power or arrogance when we defy the natural laws of existence. And this has a lot to do with that axis of Taurus and Scorpio when you look at their mythology as well, because Taurus has a very similar theme, just more having to do with, like, it's Venus ruled, right, as opposed to Mars ruled. So they're these balancing opposites, and Taurus season is all about the beauty and the blossoming, but still respecting those processes of the earth and the natural laws and order of existence. So the bull of Taurus season, in its mythology, Ishtar sends the bull as a punishment, and this bull wreaks havoc and destroys crops and just destroys the world because the humans were not respecting the laws of nature. And we have a similar story and similar lessons with Scorpio. Scorpio, the mythology of Scorpio, the most popular story revolves around the story of Orion, who is this great hunter. And he gets a little bit arrogant, and he boasts that he can kill any animal on earth. And this angers the earth, or the goddess Gaia, who represents the spirit of the earth. And because of that, she sends a great scorpion to destroy him. And they get in this great battle, and the Scorpio stings Orion and kills him. And they are both sort of immortalized in the sky with their different constellations, and they're opposite each other so that they never share space again, because they're these, forces of destruction. And so again, we just see this story as a reminder of symbols of power that, when they're misused or when they're not respected, come back to humble or destroy us. And the lesson here is one of humility and respect for forces that are greater than ourselves, whether they be natural, spiritual, cosmic, and especially when it comes to the forces of death. It's kind of that balancing opposite of Taurus season, where we're celebrating the birth. Now we're celebrating the death. And again, we think about the holidays that are arising during the season, Halloween, Dia de los Muertos. We are honoring what is visibly happening around us. And it's a reminder that, like, we're not in control, and we should adhere to these laws of nature to remind ourselves that death and decay and rotting and transformation, those are all just as important and worthy of celebration and honor as the birth and as the new and as the blossoming and the fruits of abundance. This is part of that process, right? Is that things must transform, they must change. So when it comes to the ruling planets, they definitely bring a lot of the energy of the season. Mars and Pluto. Pluto is Scorpio's modern ruler, the planet of transformation and death. And Pluto is really asking us to peel back the layers. Any layers that we've used to protect ourselves, to keep ourselves from really seeing the full truth because it's too painful, or because we just feel like we can't deal with it. We just don't have the strength, or we don't have the courage. Pluto excavates what's hidden, excavates what's underneath. He's the ruler of the underworld. And he's also, when in these stories of the underworld, you meet a moment of judgment as well, right? And so it's this moment of reckoning again with like forces that are greater than you, these forces of life and death. So we need to examine what we've been hiding during this season, or what we've been hiding from, and to embrace any kind of discomfort or pain, the sting of that Scorpio or Scorpion's stinger, any kind of discomfort that's arising from actually seeing these hidden truths, especially when it comes to power and manipulation, whether we're the ones that have been misusing the power and control we have when it comes to intimate connections or relationships, or the other way around. And we just did a bunch of work with Libra season, right? And in assessing our relationships and this exchange and share of energy and resources. So Scorpio really deepens us into that. It's not just about the fair balance and exchange of energy and resources, but now of power. And also of riches, right? With power and wealth, they go quite hand in hand. And then in the traditional rulership, Mars is also fueling the energy of this season with passion and with willpower, right? It's fire planet. Fire has to do with the soul and this will to live, to act, to fight, to defend. And so we can feel very empowered to finally face our deeper truths, initiating our own inner process of regeneration, of evolution, of death and rebirth. And I think what's really beautiful about this Mars and Pluto's play that's happening during Scorpio season is that it, for me, it really encapsulates the truth of this very common kind of spiritual saying that we hear a lot, which is as above, so below. You'll hear that a lot, and that's actually a mistranslation. And the saying is actually the above is of the below, and the below is of the above. And so as above, so below, people usually understand that to mean like, you'll see the tree of life and it's like the branches and then the roots. It's like, oh, the branches look the same as the root system underneath. They're separate, it's branches and roots, but they look the same. So they're reflections of each other. And I love that play with Mars and Pluto, because Mars is like the birth of the seed and the sprout above ground, and then Pluto is this underworld and what's going on beneath. Scorpio is underwater, what's going down even where we can't see, or what we may not be aware of. And when we think about the actual true translation of the above is of the below and the below is of the above, it's not that they're separate reflections of each other, it's that they are each other. And so if during Scorpio season, I feel like this great truth really comes to light. Like if we really want to evolve, if we really want to change, if we really want to be better, stronger, and mature and grow, we have to find that gateway through a death. We find that gateway of change through a death. So if we want to find our greatest strength and we want to be the best version of ourselves, we find it in our darkness. We find it in the place that we fear to enter, or that we fear to confront. If we want to shine bright and be this beautiful light for the world, we have to explore our darkness. We will only find that light rooted in our darkness. And that to me really exemplifies the true meaning of the above is of the below. It's if you want to find this great strength, you've got to explore it. The gateway to it is through your weakness. And that to me is really the truth of Scorpio season. It's confronting that death is an initiation, it's not an end. And so if we want to evolve, we have to meet that initiation of death through the thing that we don't want to do, that we've been running from, or we've been running from feeling. Scorpio season will confront us with it. So we're really meeting this beautiful lesson here, very uncomfortable, but to me, very beautiful lesson that addressing what is hidden can actually free us for renewal and for regeneration. And we'll be feeling this quite intensely through our emotions, right? Because that's Scorpio's realm. But Scorpio also rules over parts of the body that can help us process our emotions. And so we want to make sure that we're supporting these parts of our body, which is what I talked about before, the reproductive system, the colon, the bladder, all of these processes of elimination, intake, and then elimination, cleansing, and renewal. So we'll think about, in that sense, really focusing on the large intestine and the lungs, and also the reproductive system. This is a great, I love to talk about the menstrual cycle during this part of the year. You know, it's continual and it's happening every month, but this is a great time to really learn more about that process of the body and focus on and honor her. This time of the year is ruled by the metal element in Chinese medicine. And the metal element is this transitional element between summer, all this intense, fiery yang energy, and winter, which is the peak of yin, moistening, cooling, dark, cold, water energy. So we're transitioning from there through the metal element. And the metal element is going to rule over organs that are crucial to these processes of intake and elimination. So again, we want to focus on the large intestine, the colon, our digestive processes, but sort of the end of the digestive process. How are we detoxifying and making sure we're eliminating or getting rid of the things that can't help us and that we don't need? And the lungs are helping us also process, helping us process sadness and grief. When we feel all of this grief coming up as we're confronting things that, you know, these emotions, or we're meeting death, we don't want to hold it into the body. We want to support the processes of the body that help us to get rid of the grief we're feeling. And it's not to say that we'll, like, oh, you just won't feel the grief anymore. I think that's really difficult in the world we're living in. But it's just deepening and strengthening the systems that can support you to keep that process moving, so that you are making space for grieving, but then when you're done grieving something, you can let it go. And to me, letting it go means cleaning it and putting it somewhere where it has space, and it can be revisited if it needs to be, but it's not in the way of you progressing, right? And so it's a similar process with health and with the body. And then metal element imbalance that can come up during this season is associated with dryness. So we think about like constipation, or the lungs, like a cough in the lungs because they're not being moistened well. We're holding on to something and we're not able to release it properly. So this can show up as dry skin, as constipation, or respiratory issues. Again, we are entering cold and flu season, COVID season peaking. We want to support the body and the immune system and our process of intake and elimination. So as far as respiratory health, we want to make sure we keep the body moistened to fight this dryness. Moistening the lungs can help prevent dry coughs and respiratory infection. Again, focus on these white foods for lung health. So daikon radish, lotus root, white mushrooms, pears, apples, avocados, anything that's high in water content, cucumbers, celery, seaweed, high water content, high fat content. This is how we nourish the yin in the body, moisten the body. And as far as herbs, I would highly recommend working with mullein. Mullein is so protective and restorative for the lungs, really beautiful herb for the lungs and the body. And then while we're focusing on hydration and while we're focusing on, making sure we're moistening the body, keeping the digestive system moist, we can look at herbs like slippery elm, like marshmallow root. But we also want to make sure that we're not harming our digestive fire. And so we're not having a cold cucumber salad and then a cold juice and then a gazpacho soup. You want to make sure that your liquids are warming during the fall season. So this is soup season, right? This is a really great way to incorporate herbs and soups, herbs and foods into a soup to help moisten and warm the body. Yes, because we don't want to weaken that digestive fire. So if you would like a more extensive list of Scorpio supportive herbs and foods for both autumn and Scorpio season, please visit the website at www.aquamooncosmos.com. Have a whole list as well as recipes for you to incorporate during this season. But I specifically want to focus on the guardian herb of Damiana. Damiana is a small aromatic shrub that's native to Central and South America, or Abayala, and it has a very rich history of use in indigenous cultures, especially the Maya and the Aztecs. I think Damiana can be a really, really beautiful herbal companion for Scorpio season. It's traditionally been used as a potent aphrodisiac and a spiritual tonic. So Scorpio rules over the reproductive system, the sexual organs, so we can see why it's associated with Scorpio. But, also when we think about our reproductive system and our sexual organs and invigorating and supporting those systems, we're thinking about supporting our vital life forces, our fertility, and our chance to renew life and also to create life. And so Damiana is not just this great herb for, vital life force energy, but also for imagination and creation, while she's like grounding us in our body, very calming and also uplifting, invigorating. She can also help bring some emotional balance and spiritual clarity. Damiana has also been used in love rituals and ceremonies to promote emotional healing, mental clarity, and deep connection. Really great for like deep meditation, for creative and imaginative work, for dream work. I just think she's such a beautiful companion for us as we're going through these deep emotional trials, that we can have some emotional balance, we can have some mental clarity, she can kind of lift mental fog. But we're also finding like new and creative ways to renew ourselves and to create. Damiana is very uplifting. So also, during this time, as we're in the crux of fall, we're really feeling like the fact that it's dark outside at 5:30, that it's getting colder. So we're just not spending as much time outside with our friends. We're spending more time indoors with less people. Can lead to a little bit of anxiety, maybe a little bit of depression. So Damiana can help with all of this, emotional stress. And she's also a really great circulatory stimulant for improving overall health and vitality, which is great because we're in cold and flu season. So there are a couple of ways to work with Damiana. Tea is really great go-to. You can take like 1 or 2 teaspoons of dried Damiana and add them to some hot water, let it steep for 5 to 10 minutes, and then you can drink daily. You can drink before a ritual. You can drink as needed. You can develop that relationship with the plant as you see fit. Another really lovely way that I like to work with Damiana is to smoke Damiana. You can smoke her alone, or you can incorporate other herbs. You can smoke a blend of Damiana and mullein. Mullein will help protect the lungs and protect the mucosal lining of the lungs. You could also incorporate some mugwort. Mugwort is also a very beautiful dream and imaginative herb to help the creative processes, protective herb. You can add Damiana to, other things you may be smoking. Again, however you see fit to develop a relationship with the plant. And also, Damiana can be used in ritual if you would like to, if you don't want to consume it. Then you can burn Damiana leaves. You can place them on an altar space or a sacred space. A lot of people are honoring ancestors during this time, honoring the dead, honoring the past. And Damiana is a really beautiful way to add some protective, cleansing energy, renewing essence. And also, again, this like honoring the creative and imaginative space and capacity during this time. So let's get into the key dates and astrology of Scorpio season. Pretty consistent like key dates during this season. I think it's going to be a pretty eventful Scorpio season. We have some pretty big transits happening. Specifically, when I talk about that full moon, Saturn going direct, Pluto moving into Aquarius. And also, when it comes to the rulers of Scorpio season, Mars is in Cancer right now. We'll move into Leo later in the season, but right now Mars is in Cancer, and Pluto, the other ruler, is in Capricorn, where it is finishing this very long story and journey since 2008. We talked about Pluto excavating these power struggles, awakening us to manipulation behind the scenes. You can check your Capricorn house for more insight into how that's been showing up for you. Go back to 2008 and think about the lessons that you've learned in that house. In general, for the collective, this has been a very intense time, I would say. Capricorn, it just generally rules over traditions, traditional structures of power and authority. We think about financial institutions. We think about how that shows up in educational institutions. We think about how that shows up in the government. There's been a real reckoning, right, of how that power is being used and manipulated and in those sectors. And so during this time, Mars and Pluto will be battling it out. Mars in Cancer, Mars doesn't like to be there, right? It's in its detriment in Cancer, it's in its fall in Cancer. And we think about Mars in Cancer having us act or fight from a place of defensiveness, emotional defensiveness, manipulation in a sense. Cancer can be a bit, emotionally manipulative. We feel like we need to defend ourselves. We feel like we might even need to get dramatic or overreactive because we're feeling very emotionally sensitive during this time. And this is opposing all of this work and the finishing and closing final chapters of this story that's happening in Pluto. And that will be it. Pluto will leave Capricorn during Scorpio season and will not be back in our lifetimes unless you plan to live for 250 years, which I don't. So this is the end, So I want you to keep that in mind while during Scorpio season, both of these rulers are battling it out with each other. And that's really coloring a lot of the energy. We also have the election during this season. If you're in the US, definitely going to be very tense time and contributing to that Pluto and Capricorn story, but also, US politics affect the world and world politics. So very big Scorpio season, very intense, having Mars in Cancer adds some emotional intensity in it. Like I said, defensiveness and wanting to protect yourself or feeling like you're almost being attacked because you feel so sensitive. So keep that in mind. That being said, the beginning of Scorpio season, we have a Scorpio new moon on the night of Halloween, November 1st, but that's the night a lot of people will be out celebrating Halloween. It's also Dia de los Muertos, so very, very potent Scorpio energy during that time. New moons are when, you'll hear in popular culture and people will talk about new moons being a time when we should start something new. You don't actually want to act or do until the light has returned. And during the new moon, it's dark, right? Which we also think about during Halloween, it being a dark moon is very Scorpio. So the moon will be dark, we'll be in a more reflective energy. We'll be thinking and reflecting on what we want to start, thinking about the new, especially when it comes to Scorpio, that Scorpio house for you. Look that up for more insight. But what is it that we want to change or we want to do? And I think it's a very supportive new moon for us to change behaviors or patterns that we are becoming aware of, that Scorpio season is having us awaken to, because of that trine to Saturn in Pisces. Saturn will still be retrograde at that time in Pisces. And so we've been on this long journey since 2023 of assessing, our spiritual discipline, of our emotional discipline with Saturn and Pisces. And this trine is helping us channel what we've learned on this journey. So keywords during this moon, I would say, are like long-term visions, thinking about how we want to start acting on them, maybe even becoming awakened to a new way to act on them or to start. And honoring the emotional discipline and maturity that's happened over this Saturn and Pisces transit, and how we can act in a new way and honor that emotional growth that's been happening. Then November 2nd, we have Mercury moving into Sagittarius. So thoughts and communication and ideas are going to become more adventurous, more expansive. We're thinking more big picture, long term during this time. We're challenging, what it is we've been told, how we were raised to think about things. This is very close to the election time, so I feel like this is very on point with how this election is gearing up to play out, which is that we want something new. We're thinking about how can we create something better and more expansive and free for ourselves long term, rather than doing what everyone said we should do or should happen. Also very supported by this Pluto and Capricorn transit that will be at the very, very final, hanging on by a thread there. And then November 3rd, Mars is moving into Leo. So Mars will be moving out of Cancer. Definitely a happier place for Mars to be in a fire sign. Although I would say there's a tendency for us to be a little bit dramatic or to be seeking some sort of validation in the way that we're acting, especially acting on this new moon and the new moon revelations insights that may have come to us. So we want to be careful there of not, we just went through this emotional trial with the way that we're acting and behaving. We're going to have some courage to be bold and to be more authentic and to really want to be seen, but we don't want to show out, which can be kind of the shadow side of Leo there. And then a couple days later, November 7th, Mercury will begin its pre-shadow retrograde phase. I feel like I wanted to mention this because pre-shadow sometimes can be a little bit almost more intense than the actual retrograde period, and maybe that's just because we get used to it, how the mishaps that happen during that retrograde by the time it actually goes retrograde. But yeah, I just wanted to note and then make you aware that we will be moving into that Mercury pre-shadow. So as soon as we're having all these big ideas and we're feeling expansive, we're kind of pulled back to like slow it down and internalize these and think before acting. Definitely want to double check things, expect little mistakes or mistakes from the past to come to our attention now so that they can be rectified and fixed. I don't like all the fear mongering around Mercury retrograde. It's more about having this beautiful opportunity to go back and revise things and see them in a new way. Yeah. And then the 11th, Venus is going to move into Capricorn. So what we're attracting, what we desire, ideas around romance and romantic relationships, but also, finances and money, getting a little bit more practical, thinking a little bit more long term about what's going to last. It's giving cuffing season starts around then. Yeah, I wanted to mention it as well because Pluto will still be in Capricorn. They won't be conjunct or anything, but there is still that idea of what we desire, what we attract, kind of conjoining with all this work we've been doing in Capricorn with Pluto. So I feel like it complements that transit as well. And then November 12th, Saturn will go direct. Anytime a planet stations direct or stations retrograde, I feel there's definitely something that's felt. It can be kind of an intense time. Sometimes an event can happen, or it's just like, oh, I'm really feeling this today. So we've been through this long journey of Saturn in Pisces. We've been revising our spiritual practices, our approach to spirituality, our discipline around it, our ideas of how it can be practically integrated into our lives. There's also Pisces is the poet, the musician, the artist. And so there's also this idea of like karmic reckonings, but also rewards. So, a lot of the work that you've been doing in your Pisces house and around your spiritual practices, your art, your spiritual exploration, you can maybe see something sort of manifest, a little reward from Saturn there during that time. Also wanted to mention it because it happens very close to the full moon. And I think the full moon is quite powerful this in Scorpio season. I will do a separate video on it. So, won't say too much or go too deep into it. But this full moon is in Taurus, right? That's the balancing opposite energy of Scorpio. And it's conjunct Uranus in Taurus, and Uranus has been there since 2011. Yes, or 2018. Oh, no, okay, I need to check. I always forget how long the Uranus transit are, but it's been there for a while. And Uranus is shaking things up in that sense that it is the planet of revolution, of liberating revolution. This is like shocking upsets. We're liberating ourselves. And during this season of release and renewal and transformation, I think this can be pretty significant. They're 1 degree away from each other, the moon and Uranus. So this will be a very Uranus influenced moon. Taurus is that sign of safety and security, of material possessions and finances, but also self-worth. So Uranus has been helping us innovate and change and liberate ourselves from how we are interacting with our body, with our material world and possessions, with our finances, with things we desire, with the things we accumulate and possess in order to survive, and also our relationship with the earth, right? Our first body and the being who gave us our body. how we can ground ourselves and find stability in our body and in the earth and our relationship to her during all this transformation of Scorpio season. It's sextiling Neptune and trining Pluto. These are both supportive aspects. Neptune is in Pisces, where it is at home, so it's able to express itself very well. We're being supported by our imagination, our spiritual practices, our ideas, our, what we can imagine and dream, and the work that Neptune has been doing in Pisces. And it's also trining Pluto, which we know is in Capricorn and wants us to transform and to really finish out this story strong, because Pluto, that will be the final legs of Pluto, which I think is very significant for that moon. Again, if you'd like to know more, especially like how this will really affect you, you can sign up for the newsletter online on the website. And I put horoscopes in the newsletter for the full moons. And I'll also have a video for that as well, closer to the 15th. But I do think this will be a very impactful moon. I think what I would say is, if you've been waiting for some sort of breakthrough or a release, this moon can be very supportive. All of the outer planets that are involved in that moon are also changing signs next year. So it's kind of like this final chapter, which is why it's giving this energy of like breakthrough and release. And then lastly, but definitely not least, we have huge transit November 19th. Pluto officially moves into Aquarius. No more Pluto in Capricorn. We're done for our lifetime. This can be very, very significant. The 16th, I didn't put it on here. Sorry to backtrack for a second, but the 16th, the Sun and Uranus will oppose each other as well. Uranus and Taurus, Sun and Scorpio. So I think that also could be kind of speaks to this moon, continuation of what's happening in the moon, the Sun illuminating the work of Uranus and Taurus. And then a couple of days later, we have Pluto in Aquarius. We're moving from all of this work of destruction and also rebuilding in these ideas of, personal power, traditional structures, manipulation, control, authority figures, in this collective arena of finances and long-standing structures and all of this. But you should check your Capricorn house to see how that's really been showing up for you. I'm a Capricorn stellium, so I cannot wait for this to be releasing me. I'm also an Aquarius stellium, so we'll go right back into it. But in general, we're closing a major chapter during this time, and we're moving into a future that is really marked by innovation, technological progress, the peak of like human potential. It's just going to be a totally new era, a new chapter. So we can definitely expect this energy to be new, and for there to be, since Pluto has gone direct, it's felt like the season finale. So I feel like we'll get even more intensely into that energy as we get closer to this date. So definitely mark your calendars for some of those days. I hope this was helpful and you've learned more about Scorpio and Scorpio season, how you can support yourself and your body through these transitions. Again, if you would like to learn more, I have tons of information about Taurus full moon, Scorpio season, recipes for the fall, recipes for Scorpio season, how to work with Scorpio's herbs, all on the website. So you can visit us at www.aquamooncosmos.com, or you can also follow us on Instagram at aquamooncosmos. And please sign up for the newsletter if you would like more information on the moons, moon rituals, again, horoscopes, and recipes as well for herbs to work with to support you through. And happy Scorpio season.